Okay, so today's the 11th day of Nisan, and the 9th of April. The Rebbe's 124th birthday from 1902. Okay, so we're speaking about why the Jewish people there were in a state of small-mindedness, right? Katnus, which means that they were like in gestation. So we need to say a few more words before we continue, because he doesn't fully explain it here and needs some more explanation. So he said here, he gave us the basics. The basics are that during the time of the Patriarchs, the connection with God was through nullification. It wasn't through mitzvos. It wasn't through commandments. There were no commandments yet. So what did the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah represent relative to that state of the Patriarchs? And again, they had their relationship that they built with God that came from themselves. They nullified themselves to His will, and in some, we would almost feel that it was miraculous. But yesterday, Gabi said correctly that it's the thesis that the mitzvot, the commandments, are natural to man. They're not really something that needs to be commanded from above in order to reveal information about what to do.
Information, you said?
About what to do. It's not informative. It's not telling you, okay, if you want to lead a good life, this is what you need to do.
Oh, no.
In the same way, no, it's an interesting thesis. Not everybody agrees. Right? There's a thesis that says that the mitzvot are natural.
So it's intuitive.
They're intuitive.
For them it was intuitive.
Why isn't it intuitive for me?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So the reason it's not intuitive for me, apparently, is because I'm not very well connected to myself. Let's say,
to yourself?
Like yeah, to myself. If I, in the same way that when a person is ill,
to yourself would become intuitive.
Right. So a person is ill, right? Let's say the person has a mental problem.
Yeah.
So you can't trust his judgment about himself.
Right.
In the same way, we're ill in a certain sense. We're suffering from exile. Because we're suffering from exile means that it's not natural for me to do the mitzvot. So I need Hashem to reveal the information about the mitzvot to me.
So in a sense, until the sons went down to Mitzrayim, in a way, if you want to say, they were intuitive to this.
Right. And
they
when
hit Mitzrayim, boom.
Not just when they hit Mitzrayim, but there was a big difference, he says here, between the patriarchs and their offspring. He said that the tribes are still considered branches of the patriarchs, okay. So for them it was still intuitive to a degree.
To a degree.
Not completely.
No.
But as the generations went on and there was no intuition left, let's call it. Again, this is according to this thesis, a very interesting thesis. So they're doing things just because of tradition.
That's how we went down in Mitzrayim. We started at a higher...
Right. And it kept going down until it's just a tradition and you do things. Yeah. And we said that when you're in tradition and you do things, it doesn't last.
It doesn't, no.
It's very hard. So still we have a very good quality called, we saw that when we were talking about Gida Nasha, we have this quality of amkshe oref. We have a thick nape, like a very thick skin in our nape. And what does that mean? And so he said, it means that it's very hard for something to derail us from our tradition. That people stick to the tradition very strongly. We said the only thing that hurts that is a malek. And we talked about that in Gida Nasha. That was a very important introduction to all of this. In any case, however it is, whether this thesis is correct or not, it doesn't really matter. The point is that what worked for the patriarchs no longer worked for the children. They couldn't reach this state. Now, one way of looking at that is that this is a descent. Like you just said, that we're becoming further and further from God.
Yeah.
But
from ourselves.
Well, right.
Okay.
Again, that's the problem here. That it looks at things very. I'll say it looks at things very much from man's point of view.
Okay.
From God's point of view, it doesn't look like that. From God's point of view, this is a whole discussion in Chassidus, and I have a whole series on it. It's called "Is Exile a Punishment?" From God's point of view, exile is not a punishment. What is exile? Exile is a state between two states. There are two states of connection to God. One is through nullification. the other one is through commandments, and in between there has to be a nothingness, like a non-being state, to move from one to the other. And that's what exile really is. So based on that analysis, which is the Hasidic analysis, Reb Hillel Paritch writes a mimer that unfortunately we don't have in its original form from the Rebbeim, but we know that he took it from the Alter Rebbe, that the exile is a state like he describes it, and I really recommend watching that whole series. It's a long series, it's about 30 classes, but it really covers it, that it's like a teacher teaching a class, and then in the middle of explaining his mailach, the way he sees the whole issue, he suddenly thinks of, he's in the middle of explaining it, and suddenly it dawns on him. He gets this sudden inspiration that it can be explained much, much better, that the understanding here is actually much deeper than what he thought. And so then he stops talking. And he stops talking for a long time, and he's thinking about how do I present this deeper understanding, until the point where even he leaves the classroom and he's gone for some time, and the students might think that they did something wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just that the teacher now has a better, we call it a svara, a better way of explaining what the issue here is. So he says the same thing is between these two states, that serving God by nullification is very good by the patriarchs, but there's an even better way. And the better way is through commandments. You do the same things. It's all the same. It's not a different religion. It's all the same. But it's a deeper understanding. Why is it a deeper understanding? Okay, because, and that needs to be discussed, and it's discussed a lot in the Tanya, this idea of Kabbalah's Ol, this idea of taking on the yoke of heaven, which carries a person through thick and thin, which
it's
nullification by itself.
Relationship to Hashem.
Right. You're receiving God.
Yes.
You're performing the mitzvot not out of your own power, but because of the commandment. The commandment becomes the empowering force behind the mitzvot. So that's really what the exile was about. It's a state between nullification, which is all you nullifying to God, and God saying there's a better way to do this, which is that I'm going to empower you to perform the commandments. Yes. And the commandments again are the root, not the root. They're the tachlis. They're the purpose for which the world was created. Why? Because we really don't know what the purpose was of creation until it fulfills its purpose.
Which were the commandments. The
commandments are like the vehicle through which this purpose is going to be revealed. We don't know yet.
Okay.
We can't fully know it yet. Okay. That's the first mimer in the Zohar. What?
You could say it's clear because we know it's now not our intuition but actual.
No, right. So the commandments in this sense are much more clear.
Yes.
They're much better defined because So giving the Torah and giving the commandments as a commandment, not just as a right way of life. It's not just a way of life. It's a commandment, something uncommanded, was the next stage. And in between, you're in a state of a gestation.
Why did there have to be gullus? Because we needed gestation.
That's the gestation between the two states. Okay. So that's why they descended, because they went into gestation in Egypt. Egypt was the womb. So now you can say that the better explanation, why does Pharaoh have so much strength? Because Pharaoh is the placenta. He's the placenta. He's the one who's holding us. He's carrying the baby. So he gets everything, and he passes on whatever he feels is right for the child, for the fetus inside the placenta. So that's really the understanding here. Okay, so he's also a klipa.
There could be things in the placenta that don't make any sense to us.
Of course.
Yes.
I said you have to go beyond the good guys and bad guys.
Yeah. That's exactly what
you have to, like the placenta is not the bad guy.
No.
Certainly in a child, in a mother who's pregnant, nobody would say the placenta is the bad guy. But sometimes they do, because if the placenta is keeping the child in and the child can't be born, then that's the problem. And really, when you read the story of the Exodus, that's exactly what happened. Hashem sent Moses to Pharaoh, telling him, "Send my people, let my people go." That's all he wanted. It's time for them to leave. It's Paro who doesn't want to let them leave, so now he becomes an impeding force. as an impeding force. You have to get rid of it.
It has to be induced in the end.
Right. It's an induced labor,
Yes.
basically. Right. So that's the really the picture of all of this in the Hasidic mind. Again, it's a Kabbalistic mind, but the Hasidic mind, I think, is ובני ישראל היו בקטנות, והיה השפעת השפע להם גם כן בבחינת אחוריים לבד, וזהו שעבדים לפה, we read all this, I'm just reading it again, שהוא עיקר המקבל משם, והם היו מקבלים דרך השר שלו. So they were receiving through Pharaoh's minister, his archangel. That's like saying that he's the placenta, he's the one who's giving you, so you have to receive from him. The only problem is, like we said, that he doesn't let you go in time. He doesn't understand that it's time for the labor to begin. וכל זהו עניין היניקה על דרך הראשון שנבר לעילה, אחוריהם אל המקיף, רוצה לומר לרוממות הרצון נותן שיריים לכלבים והם השיריים גדולים, ועם כל זהו מבחינת אחוריים כנ"ל. אוקיי. ואמר עוד במצרים מצר ים, זהו עניין הסיבה שנייה להגלות, ועניין עיבור זה בבטן אימא. The word, now everything we just explained is hinted to in the word Mitzrayim, in the name Mitzrayim. What does Mitzrayim mean? It means Meitzar. Meitzar means a constricted space. Yam. Yam is like ocean, but it's also just the letters Mi. Meitzar Mi. Mi, Mem Yud, is equal to 50. So the word Mi in general in the Zohar is a stand-in for Bina, for the mother Partzuf. So that's what we're saying. We're saying that Mitzrayim is the constricted part of the mother. What do we mean? That's where we're going through the gestation, and we're going to be born from that. So it's basically saying that Mitzrayim is the placenta, it is the womb, it is the mother. או מי שאז היה בקטנות, זה בבטן אימא הנקרא ים. So Za, the child, the small continents, the emotions, which are now going to be born, they're in the womb of Ima, of the mother, who's called Yam again, or Mi, or either one. The idea being that it's 50, it's equal to 50, and there's 50 gates of understanding. And this concept of 50 gates of understanding is intrinsically connected to Egypt. How's it intrinsically connected? The sages say that the exodus from Egypt is mentioned 50 times in the Pentateuch. Okay, whether it's 50 times or it's more, there's a lot of discussion about it. Apparently there's more than 50 times. But yeah, the Ramak, Moses Gordovero, goes through all the times and explains why some of them are relevant and some of them are not. In the end, it's remembering the Exodus from Egypt that's mentioned 50 times. There's also another moving out of constriction, which is the 50 questions. There are 50 questions, very easy to see them. 50 questions that God asks Job at the end of Job. And those questions were the questions that freed him from his suffering. Meaning that he also, in his suffering, was in a state between two states. And that in general is the story of life. Yeah. That whenever there is a elevation to a new state, before that there's a state of nothingness. There's a state of feeling that you have to leave yourself behind. Now some people do it by just...
you really talk about ego death on a psychological level.
Yes. It has to. It's called anachat atzmuto. That's what it's called in the Chassidus, which means leaving or letting go of myself.
That's ego
death. In a certain sense. We don't really want it to die, but it's that I'm not doing things for myself. So when you think about it, with the patriarchs, that's exactly the point. Their nullification to Hashem was because of themselves. This had to be left behind. They had to leave this behind. I'm not doing it anymore because I want to live naturally, I want to be intuitive, whatever. We're doing it now because God commanded. And now, by the way, after this exile was also the same thing. This long exile that we are still in is exactly the same thing. We're leaving the commandments behind, not to stop with the commandments, but rather to re-add the intuitive aspect. That's how it's explained in Chassidus. That we're going to recommit to the way that the patriarchs served God. So now it's going to be commandments together with the natural intuitive aspect. And that we call natural consciousness.
This is uniting with the true ego.
Right. It's exactly the way to think about it. So what you just said is exactly right. This is really what the Tanya is talking about. A lot of people have trouble with understanding, what does the Tanya want from me?
You mean the macro view?
Yeah, the macro view of the Tanya is, he's saying we're on the brink of another change. And for that change to happen, what does it mean that the real ego will come out? That's the ego of the divine soul. And everything that Tanya is teaching is, look, you have two options. You can go by the animal soul, which is doing everything for yourself. But there's the divine soul, which when it does things for itself, is really following the commandment of Hashem. And that's the combination between the time of the patriarchs and our time of commandments. Okay, so we'll have to end here. And God willing, tomorrow we'll be able to finish a little bit more, but I guess we're going to go into Pesach with this, which is fitting also. Okay, so this was a hope bringing stuff together, either where this is all going.